disadvantages us in one way or the other. So we really feel that it is very important that specific industry benchmarking exercises are undertaken such that even when we come up with issues in terms of emission trading, this is actually referenced in that area. It's key for the industry to be consulted on proposed emission trading mechanism, because here we give an example of cap and trade, which limits emission from the sector, but it can also be an alternative to carbon tax. The model is proposed, then an appropriate benchmark specific to the industry, to each industry, should be thoroughly assessed and proposed. Similarly, for any trading mechanism proposed, it's important that the scope and the limits of any trading mechanisms are clearly defined. An example, if an industry invests in carbon offsetting or carbon footprint reduction projects, how will this be managed under any trading scheme? So this needs to be specifically clarified, and if possible, it could be maybe part of the schedules to this climate change bill. So when we go to part 2, which talks about trading, market and non-market mechanisms, there is an indication that we need to get an approval from the minister. Our understanding that these schemes are supposed to be voluntary, so it shouldn't require the approval of the minister, but maybe we would suggest it will be submitted to the minister for information, guidance, and action. Because in other countries, different statutory instruments are used to encourage emitters to take part in these schemes, e.g. the tax rebates. What may not be stated here that once a project proponent participates in any of these schemes, they have an obligation to provide periodic reports to the department. We shall later on make a comments in relation to the bill being silent on the issue of data sharing, because definitely if you need to provide the information to the department. So on part 4, we also take note that the same comments would apply, because it talks about a minister getting an approval from the minister. So our worry is that by providing for approval by the minister, this could just put off project opponents from taking part in these voluntary schemes. But again, if we need more information on these mechanisms, my colleague Justin Akum here will be able to provide. So measuring of emissions, which is part 4. Measuring of emissions, reporting and verification of information. The bill makes a general reference to the main requirements for measuring, reporting, and verification of data. And indeed, we have started on this process, and we are already developing a system with Ministry of Water and Environment. But there are no details on the greenhouse gas emission accounting standards that will be required, the level of verification, or the need, or indeed any information on what emissions are outside or inside the scope. Industry requires clarity on this aspect before any proposals are made on allocation of allowances. Greenhouse gas emissions accounting standards that will be required, level of verification, or indeed any information on what emissions are outside or inside of the scope should be developed and provided as a schedule. It's important that the accounting requirements that are established in order to support any carbon pricing mechanisms that will also be put in place. So also when you look at subsection 2, there is need to clarify on the determination of the greenhouse gases after every 2 years. We felt this was too frequent, because definitely it is not really practical that we are going to have determination of the greenhouse gases every 2 years. But also when we go to section 12, it indicates that the data on emission, that is not on your write-up, but on section 12, it indicates that the data on emissions shall be verified by registered verifiers. But the bill is silent on data sharing. We recommend that the bill should propose a data sharing agreement, especially data that is provided by the private sector for monitoring, reporting, and verification. Because most of this information we shall be getting it from the private sector. So it's actually very key that a data sharing mechanism is indicated in the bill. On national reference levels, we note that there is need to set long-term targets for reduction of greenhouse gases early enough, because there is reference to yearly. They talk about a base year or something like that. So we need to be able to set this early enough, and this is known. On section 11, on national reporting, this section might need to include a clause that obliges lead agencies, ministries to share reports on emissions within their respective sectors in order to effectively facilitate the national reporting mechanism. But also when we go back to part 4, I think there's an issue that my colleague had raised on the issue of when people report to Ministry of Water and Environment in terms of the projects that they are undertaking, the information does not get specifically to the sector ministries. If somebody is undertaking a project that is related in terms of carbon markets or carbon reduction that is related to energy, so the person reports directly to Ministry of Water and Environment, and the sector ministry that is actually responsible for that activity does not get to know what is actually happening. So that also has to be clarified, that the sector ministry should actually be informed. On part 5, institutional arrangement, the institutional arrangement seems to focus on the government ministry structures, ministries, districts, which may not be effective. I think we need to look at how we make this structure a little more comprehensive to include the private sector. On the lead agencies, some lead agencies have a number of obligations within the bill, within these sections of the bill. That is section 16. It might be important to clarify which agencies will be involved, since the National Climate Change Policy identifies some key sectors and corresponding agencies. Because the policy on section 5.1.3 makes reference to Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Energy, Ministry of Works. So we also feel that this should be in line with what is in the policy. Reference to the policy could be made to clarify which agencies in particular are meant when we talk about the lead agencies here. Then when we talk about part 6 on financial provisions, there is no mention of regulatory mechanism for access to finance. The bill is generally weak on participation of the private sector and the civil society in climate change financing, and yet actually you find that that is where many of these activities and the financing actually comes from. Part 7, miscellaneous. Section 22 gives a lot of powers to the Department of Climate Change as opposed to the Environment Committee. And then we have section 25 on climate change litigation. Our risk is that there clear grounds should be provided as a schedule, otherwise this will be abused. The section promotes litigation against the sector or sectors, but for us, because we are going into the oil and gas activities, we are definitely very worried about this. For instance, it's indicated that the person may apply to the High Court for relief against an action or omission that threatens efforts towards adaptation to or mitigation to climate change, implying that any action that is not in line with renewable energy could be perceived as an action or omission towards climate change adaptation, and this will call for litigation. It's highly recommended that this section is revisited and clear grounds for litigation provided if it is a must. If not, it could be removed from the bill. So when we go to the schedules, on schedules 2, 3, 4, we had made mention of this before. It's not prudent to have us attaching an international convention. The Kyoto Protocol definitely was replaced by the Paris Agreement and should actually get out of the bill. So we feel that this should not be part of the schedules 2, 3, 4, but rather get some aspects that we need to domesticate and provide for parameters for measurements and implementation as a country. We suggested that one of the schedules would provide the greenhouse gases that will be monitored and reported upon under the bill in line with the, there again we also talked about the Kyoto Protocol, but because this is reported in the Kyoto Protocol, but this should be actually cancelled. So we definitely feel that our schedules need to be recast and we come up with issues that are really domesticated. There are other suggestions, suggested aspects for consideration, which could go into the regulation, or maybe some of the aspects could be brought up in the law. I take note of the comments of the chairperson. There are effects of climate change on catchment areas and the potential for hydropower generation sites, because definitely if we don't protect our catchments, and this has been critically an issue as you look at the issues of the high water, the rising water levels. You take a note that we had the islands moving towards the dams, and this was affecting the operation capacity of the dams. So definitely the aspects of catchment protection need to be taken into consideration. This would be a suggested mechanism maybe for raising funds for, number 2 could be a suggested mechanism on how to raise funds for climate change. How increase in power tariffs can be factored into climate change matrix and payments for units of power. If ecosystems like forests or wetlands contribute to climate change mitigation through carbon sequestration, how would this be accounted for in power matrix, especially unit costs, and how such revenue may be returned to support catchment protection? Number 3 is the issues of polluter pays principle, how we shall measure our footprint and introduce mechanisms for reduction through carbon sequestration, because definitely each of our projects have a footprint. So we are very keen to how this should introduce mechanisms for reduction through carbon sequestration. Number 4 is to justify the need to increase investments in electrical grid network, which would facilitate penetration of distribution lines to rural areas and hence reduce biomass conversion or use and promote alternative energy use and hence mitigate climate change. We also talked about the aspect of community awareness, how community awareness may be promoted through clean energy initiatives and their involvement in afforestation or restoration of catchment areas. The aspects of procurement, we shall appreciate that procurement now has gone green, how procurement can be used as a preventive mechanism for climate change effects in electrical facilities, but this should also be across the board through specifications and standards. When we talk about number 7, how dispose of obsolete electrical infrastructure can be done to prevent emissions throughout the life cycle, we shall definitely appreciate that because we are signatories to these various conventions, agreements, and protocols, we will have we have transformers in the country that currently contain PCB and other chemicals that have been banned. So we need to ensure that this is also taken into consideration and their contribution to climate change. The other aspect on how to factor air and road mileage, office paper, this might be a management issue which can actually go into the aspect of the regulations and prevention of greenhouse gas emissions during maintenance and servicing. So that is what we had to share as a ministry. I don't know whether my colleagues have issues to add.
Madam Akumu, anything? And the gentleman there, you have some more comments before?
Yeah, I would just emphasize one point on the on the aspect of industry benchmark and the setting of targets, just to emphasize that this bill really needs to be reconciled very well with the national development goals and aspirations as enshrined in the NPD3 and of course the Vision 2040, especially from the perspective of the oil and gas sector. This is a concern for us because, as you know, this is a young sector that we are just starting and which is very much associated with greenhouse emissions. So being cognizant of the benefits as stated here of climate change bill, the climate change aspects, just to make sure that those will be well balanced with the country's development goals and aspirations. I submit.
So, Mr. Chairman, those are our comments. We'll wait for clarifications that may be required by the members. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I want to thank you for the presentation. And this will help us since you made reference to Minister of Water and Environment. We are meeting them tomorrow. And I think this is timely. So the issues that are more aligned to Minister of Water and Environment, we shall clarify with them and see that they are addressed. And you talked about subsequent agreements other than the UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement. I don't know which subsequent agreements you are referring to. Maybe you could note them for us. And then, yes, definitely the bill has to refer to our targets. First of all, we signed and ratified some of these convention treaties and protocols. And the last one was the Paris Agreement, which we signed and ratified. And along that line, we came back. We have our NDC. Before it was INDC, now it is NDC. And we say we are going to make contribution to reduce climate change in the country by reducing greenhouse gases by 22%. That is what we say as a country. Though globally we want to reduce by 45%. So what are we going to do? But as you can see, our NDC is very shallow. That's why we need revision in that area to include aspects which we missed because we did it in a hurry. So, and it should be in line with our Vision 2040, should be in line with our NDP 3. And we even went ahead to develop a strategy, what we call the Green Growth Strategy. Even in the NDC, we have joined the NDC partnership. So all those must be in line to see that we make a good law that will not tie our hands, but also will help to address climate change in totality. Now, the role of this committee, you talked about the different sectors, Paro talked about the different sectors. This committee is one committee that is interacting with almost all the MDAs, all, including private sector and also civil society. Because when we are reporting our contribution to addressing climate change in the country, we are not going to leave the work of private sector or NGOs. So this committee is trying to see the responsiveness of the government of Uganda in addressing climate change. The problem is we have so many efforts we are putting in place, but they are scattered and there is no coordination. We thought the Prime Minister, who is the chair of the Policy Committee on Environment, would, but how frequent is that meeting convened? So those are some of the challenges we are still getting. That's why today we wanted to meet Minister of Energy, Mineral Development, and Minister of Agriculture, because they also have another convention there, the UNCCD, the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification. But we have rescheduled them because they are doing a lot of issues to do with the land use, climate change and land use issues. So these efforts are really scattered, and we need a proper coordination. That's why in the bill some people are suggesting, should we have a climate change committee or should we have a climate change council? So those are areas we need to explore. But I want to thank you for the submissions. We shall categorize them and see which group we should interact with so that these issues are addressed. But we also note that the oil and gas sector is our priority now in Uganda, but there are issues around oil and gas sector which are related to climate change. Maybe I expected more from you actually on this one. Maybe you will still give us some highlights. Many countries are talking about leaving fossil fuel, and if by 2030, what will be the implication by 2030, and as we do our oil and gas sector, will it have implication for funding environmental or climate change issues in the country? Issues around there, you need to brief us so that it will help us to also create awareness in the other members of parliament, because we have a lot of hope in this oil, but I don't think this oil will address all our concerns. We don't know. We don't know which quantity we have. We don't know when is the first oil coming, and the time is also going. At the international level, they are moving away, and then for us, we are moving towards that. And there is no country that can say, now you leave your oil, because we need to get our oil out. But we should get it quickly. It is over delaying down there. So these are challenges we have. Even when we go for these negotiations, we are getting it rough. So I think these are some of the issues we need to share and also enlighten the members of parliament, so that we can, and the different stakeholders, so that we can see how best we can address some of these challenges. Like the other day I was talking about, right now along the Nile there's a lot of flooding up to Khartoum because of the water. The water is too much. If you see the places like in Nevi, Panyimur area, along the Nile it is flooded. So we are talking about, with the Ministry of Disaster Preparedness, if there was coordination, or if we were a developed economy, we would have detected that these areas of Panyimur and so on, Bulisa, are prone to flooding. Now that we are going to release water in those areas, we would have put precaution. But our Ministry for Disaster Preparedness is actually disaster, more of response. I mean, we react after disaster. It's not really preparedness. So this is because of lack of coordination. They talk about funds, that they have only contingency funds. So we need to work together. So the ultimate goal is to have coordination. So I want to thank you for this presentation. And then the issue of the industry working groups, we shall note that. We have noted that. And precedent, Climate Change Act or Environment Act. So these are issues we shall iron out. I would like to invite my colleague to also make some comment. Yes. But before that, the two members who have come, please, may you introduce yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Dean Jalia, working on the board, MP Masini District. I'm a member of this committee.
Mr. Chairman, perhaps before the
Yes.
vice comes in, why can't we update the committee on oil? Because there have been some developments,
Yes.
and you have raised this, so I'm going to request director there to update the committee on the development. There are two things, maybe three: the refinery, the crude oil pipeline, and the refined oil pipeline. Where are we with this project?
Thank you, Honorable Minister. First of all, we would welcome an invitation for a specific engagement on aspects of oil and gas, so that we can provide you as much as possible information that you need to guide you in this important work that you're doing. As the Honorable Minister has said, we are currently taking forward 3 major developments in the oil and gas sector. In the upstream, what we call the Tilenga project, that encompasses the areas in Bulisa, Noya district, that we are now at a level whereby in the coming days we are going to see so many things unfold. We are going into the detailed engineering phase, and we hope an announcement on the final investment decision for the projects in the upstream can be made in the coming month. So you will at least be aware that all the appraisal work was completed, the licenses were issued, and that was some time back, but government has been negotiating with the oil companies mainly on the fiscal aspects, and for the upstream, those were concluded. The other project in the upstream is the Kingfisher project, which is in Hoima and Chikule district, and that is at the same level with the Tilenga project, and the final investment decision is going to be taken together for those 2 projects, which combined have a total production capacity of about 240,000 barrels of oil per day. The commercialization plans, as the Honorable Minister has said, will involve 2 aspects. One, the setting up of a 60,000 barrel per day refinery. Again, government entered into a project framework agreement with the consortium that is taking this forward. The FEED for the project has been completed. Right now, the company is undertaking the environmental and social impact assessment for the project, which once that has been approved will guide the detailed engineering phase before we go into the licensing aspects. And the final project is the pipeline from Kabale all the way up to Tanga. Again, the licensing bits for this project have been completed. The environmental social impact assessment was conducted, was completed, and was approved. Government has finalized the initially, or at least reached an agreement with the main legal framework to guide the project, which includes the intergovernmental agreements, the host government agreement, and right now there are 2 smaller level agreements which are being fixed, what we term as the shareholders agreement, so the shippers into the pipeline, and then how much they will charge, the tariff and transportation agreement. Again, very key milestones have been achieved on that. It is finalizing a few aspects of those discussions. Of course, these discussions have been lengthy because of what, first of all, the nature of the amounts that are involved. We are looking at a combined total investment of between 15 and $20 billion. So as you can imagine, these are projects of unprecedented magnitude in this country, and therefore a lot of effort and a lot of care is being undertaken to make sure that the government and as a country we can maximize the value that we get from these projects. I submit.
The white product pipeline?
The product pipeline, again from the refinery to Nalu Buloba, here near in Kampala, the terminal. Again, that work is ongoing. Government has acquired the right of way, the land. The environmental and social impact assessment has been undertaken, and now we are into the design phase of the project. So that is the one that will transport the white products from the refinery area to the markets here in Kampala.
Okay. Thank you, Honorable Minister, and your team. I normally call you a ministry, the hopeful ministry for this country.
Thank you.
But I always doubt whether our oil is still there or it is already taken. Thank you very much for your submissions. I need two clarifications, first of all, from the first submission. On part 5, part 7 on miscellaneous, section 22 and section 25. In some cases you were giving a suggestion, but on these two, you didn't give us some of your suggestions. For example, in section 22, where you are saying it gives a lot of power to the Department of Climate Change as opposed to the Environmental Committee. As a technical person, how do you want this to be? Would be the lead, the Department of Climate Change, or the Environmental Committee? Because this is also a committee. Let me go back also to the financial provisions. You are very much aware that this committee has no finances and it depends on the private sector. As a technical person, how do you suggest to us how we can get funding other than depending on the private sector? On litigation and climate change, what suggestion do you give on this so that we make it proper in the bill? If I go to the director, you know our country, most people are still using firewood as the source of light and cooking and what. What provisions do you have in your ministry to help these Ugandans from, I always call it defiling the trees? You see someone with trees of 1.5 years, cutting them, they are selling them to the institutions for firewood, they are using them at their homes. At the ministry that is coming up as oil and gas, what provisions do you have to help this country from cutting these young trees and in order to make the climate change enabling to every Ugandan? Then on the same note, I know you have an institution that is training people to work in oil and gas. There in Masindi, Honorable, do you, on your curriculum, do you have some relation topics connecting to curriculum to climate change to help those ones who are trained so that when they are in the communities, they help the communities on how to combat the effects of climate change and we remain with our beautiful country? How many dams are you expected to construct in the oil and the gas ministry sector to help where the waters are flooding and all those ones, and to increase on the electricity in the other rural areas? Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll start with.
Madam Chairperson, can we raise some of the issues so that when they start responding?
I see.
For Masindi. Madam Chairperson, I want to proceed from where you have stopped, and I want to look at this section 16 lead agencies. Would be private to your suggestions if at all you suggested what some of those agencies which you think should be included in this bill, because when you make an observation and you don't highlight some of those agencies, we may leave them. And I thought this is very important, especially in guiding the discussion on the bill when we are voting it. Madam Chairperson, there was a mention on the country still having some generators which have been really condemned in other countries. And this is so dangerous to us, especially as Ugandans. And I wanted to know, because I noted it here, I wanted to know what the ministry is planning to do with those generators. Because I remember there is a time when Parliament discussed and we passed a resolution. We said on the issue of like asbestos, we said all institutions, government institutions, should cease to have asbestos sheets, because asbestos sheets, of course, they are main causes of cancer in the community. But now when they mention the generators, and the generators are still in circulation, I want to know what plan do you have to get out of these generators, because it will help us. It has now added more fears into us to know that we still have them. And in the event there are still other facilities or equipments which we are using, then we shall need that mega plan of getting rid of them, because the other countries should not use our country as a dumping ground for some of these ones. I suppose even these generators, some of them might have been even donations or what. So we want to know what plan do you have to get rid of these generators. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. On page 6, number 6, how procurement can be used as a preventive mechanism. As Minister of Energy, I don't know whether you are concerned when you see so many transformers in one place. Maybe it could be for Minister of ICT or it's you, but really Minister of Energy, you really have to be concerned that there are so many transformers in one place. There are so many homesteads around there, and definitely there must be some negative effects. As Minister of Energy, I don't know what you are doing about that. Then on the masts. Then on the issue of oil extraction, from your research, I don't know whether you have done research or benchmarked on other countries. How long does it take for a country to realize the oil, to extract the oil? Because for over 15 years now, we are talking about oil. We are waiting for oil as if we are waiting for Jesus who is not coming. The oil is not seen. Those in the government are saying we are not going anywhere. We have to secure oil. Those who are outside, they are fighting to come and get the oil.
And for us who are keeping it, actually, we have given up.
And these ones who are keeping it, they have given up, like you have heard.
Is it still there?
So how can you assure us, Minister of Energy, because now you are the key now, the key sector which can assure us that maybe oil will come next week or the other month. Let us, at least you assure the country, other than waiting and waiting and waiting. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you can respond.
Okay, I'll start then the two technocrats. We'll the rest. I think if you mean transformer, not generator. Because
Generators.
no,
It's transformers.
we have no problem with generators, because our generators are using water. But where there's a problem is the old transformers, which were placed on the system, and I think there are very few now,
Yes.
which were placed on the system before enough knowledge. So they had a transformer must have oil in it. So in those days of the 50s and 60s, there was not enough information on some chemical. I think pyrochlor. There is one chemical, one oil type, which they used to use. I don't know if there's still any transformer left like that. But the new transformers are comply, so don't fear the transformer you see.
How many do we have that are not compliant?
I don't know. We will have to check that, because I remember there was one at Njeru. Those early industrial area of Jinja, they used to have those. But we have replaced most of them. Now we will get you the details of how many are left.
And Mr. Minister, how are these ones which you have replaced, how were they disposed? Those ones which were not compliant.
The oil you mean?
The transformers.
Oh, the ones which were non-compliant. We normally would dig a pit and bury. and bury them in the pit. The oil has a reaction to the skin,
Because
so we would do them carefully.
Honorable Minister, you may be aware, there is a time when people were selling that oil and
Use it.
at times even
Prepare
in
chapati.
big cities.
No, not that one. Not that one will not joke with their skin if they use it. Not that one. So that one is being handled, and then the other one is so many transformers in one place.
You said transformers,
You did.
He said must. Telephone must.
That would now be another ministry. Because I wouldn't know why they have so many. Actually, there are many. And I wouldn't know that. But now the other thing is that the oil is still there. The oil is still there. Director, can you handle those issues which were on oil, specifically like Jalia there, my colleague Jalia, saying they're tired of keeping that oil in their soil.
Because we are not sure whether it's still there, Honorable Minister. Even you yourself, as a chairperson, from the same belt.
The day that oil will leave the ground, everybody will know. Because it is a massive thing. It's not a thing which you can take quietly. The day that thing will leave the ground, you will know. Director, please.
Thank you, Honorable Minister and Honorable Members.
Let me take this.
I will address myself to the issues that have been raised. One, on what the oil and gas sector can contribute to address the aspect of deforestation. On that one, my colleague, there is an important work that the ministry does in terms of energy efficiency, biomass, and so forth. My colleague will speak to that. But specifically for oil and gas, the resources that have been discovered so far, we have what we call associated gas. So this is the gas that comes with the oil. And the estimate now is at about 500 billion cubic feet. So this is a lot of gas which can help the country. Government has carried out a gas utilization study which has recommended two options. One, LPG, so the use of this gas for the liquefied petroleum gas, which is the sort of gas that we use in our homes. So if this can also be brought into the market, then that would help as a substitute for this use of firewood. It can be obtained more reliably and also potentially cheaply. But there is also a lot of other work that the ministry does, but I thought I should point that out. We also have some potential gas field. For example, in Semuliki, we have a field there, the Tolako field, which was drilled some time back in 2006, but encountered a lot of carbon dioxide, and its processing then was determined as not feasible. The field has reverted to government. It is going to be licensed. So this could be another additional source of more gas, which can be utilized for those domestic but also industrial purposes. There was a question on if there is training on climate change aspects, for example, at the Uganda Petroleum Institute, Kigumba. I think you may have seen a lot of advertising and information highlighting the courses that are being undertaken at that petroleum dedicated institute. And among these, yes, not specifically on climate change, but the curriculum of these courses has been reviewed to add aspects that address environment in general. So you'll find something to do with probably plumbing with environment. You find something to do with petroleum engineering and environment to enrich these curricula with environment-related aspects, so that when we have the petroleum engineers, when we have the geologists out there in the field, in whatever work that they are doing, they are also mindful of the environment-related aspects. Have we benchmarked on how long it takes to commercialize oil and gas resources? yes, to extract and utilize the oil and gas resources. Now, the only way I can answer this question really is by explaining the special circumstances under which this oil is found that determine how you get to exploiting it. So you will have heard of, for example, countries like Ghana. I think that is the example that is usually given, that we discovered around the same time of 2006. And by 2011, 2012, they had started production. I wish that could be followed up with what has happened now. What has Ghana as a country gained from that very important resource? And then you will actually realize that it would have been better for the country to actually take a precautionary approach and make sure that all the systems that they need to efficiently produce and benefit from this oil are in place. So for us as a country, it has taken us a lot or substantial amount of time because of the things that needed to be in place before we can start producing it. I know most of you members have been here in this house for a very long time. You recall that when the resources were discovered, there was no policy, there was no law that was adequate to help us produce these resources. And a lot of work was done between 2006 and 2013 to put in place the policy in 2008, to put in place the acts in 2013, and to put in place the regulations in 2016. And you know that was a lot of work and a lot of debate that had a lot of work that had to be done to ensure that really the law that we have in place enables us to benefit from this oil. And I can say that really that time that was taken has benefited us as people who are implementing that law. The other aspect is on the infrastructure. So in most other countries, like in Ghana, which is usually benchmarked with, this is an offshore field. So all they need to do is drill the wells, bring in what we call an FPSO. So they just bring in a vessel, and then they drill it, goes onto the vessel, and they load, and they take to international markets. But for us here, as you know, our oil is located there in the Albertine Graben. A lot of infrastructure has had to first be put in place. So those of you who have visited will see, for example, the roads that have been put in place to enable that production to take place. We don't have any, for example, pipelines. How do you evacuate this oil? You can't really load it onto these trucks. You have to have a commercial way of evacuating the oil, and that's why we have to first put in place a pipeline. For example, if this pipeline was in place, then you save 3 years. You can actually achieve production 3 years earlier, because now for us, we have to first put that pipeline in place. So you find that as a country now, if the infrastructure that we need, the roads have been built, the pipelines have been built, we have an export pipeline, we have a refinery in place. Now you find that some countries can discover when they have neighboring countries that already have those facilities, and all you need to do is actually just tie in. So from where you have discovered, you just tie in. Now we cannot be taking the same amount of time, because for us, all that has had to be done from scratch. Now, with all that frustration and all that time that it has taken, what is the good news? I think the good news really is that beginning with this year, we are going to see a lot of developments unfolding. As I said, it has taken time, it has been painful for everybody. Businesses have been affected, but we think this is the year in which we can actually start. This is not the year for production, but this is the year for this is the year for the things to begin moving. I submit, Chair.
Let me ask you a question.
Listen to the chair.
How much are we going to make profit from this oil? How much money have we borrowed to do the investment? And how much oil will come out? And shall we still make profit? Then number two is the pipelines and so on. when the oil is finally finished, what are we going to use them for? And how much oil really do we have?
Good question.
If you take countries like Kuwait, we read about 14.4 billion barrels. South China Sea, 17.7 billion barrels. What is the one of Uganda?
I don't know the chairman's question. Because now technology, we are going towards
I'm fed us, and that's all.
vehicles are going electronic. That's electric, you don't need oil, you don't need gas, electronic. So what if we are put offside by electric?
Okay. Chair, as a country, we have a number of prospective areas for oil and gas. I think it is important that I start with this background. The one that we know is the Albertine Graben, where all the work has currently been focused. We also have other potential areas, which include, I'm sure you have heard about the Morotoka Dam Basin. Exploration work has already started in that area, acquiring data to see if it is more prospective to attract investors in that area. We have the Lake Kyoga Basin, the area around Lake Wamala. That's another prospective area. And there has also been talks of actually the Lake Victoria Basin, if it could also have potential. Those two, the work on those has not started. Now, why is that important? It is important that no one should think that the oil we have in place now is what is the only that is available. So right now, even within the Albertine Graben, the area that has been explored is only 40% of the entire prospective areas in the Graben. So these fields which are being taken forward with an estimated 6.5 billion barrels, and I had you make a comparison of the other countries, 14 billion barrels, 20 billion barrels. Yes, currently we stand at about 6 to 6.5 billion barrels, but that is only from 40% of the explored area. Right now there is another ongoing licensing round. 5 other areas have been put out for licensing. They include some in the Rhino Camp, in the Arua area, some areas around Nepi and Pakwach, some areas in Rukunjiri around Renshama, and then in Toroko, Semuliki there. So about 5 areas which have been put out for licensing to have more work. So it is the hope and it is the intention that more exploration should be able to yield more resources for the country. But right now, we stand at 6.5 billion, of which between 1 and 1.3 billion barrels can be recoverable. Now, if you look at the cost, the price of the crude today, I think it stands around 50. It has been very volatile of late because of the COVID-related crisis, but I think it's now rotating around 50. You can quickly multiply by that and see what as a gross the country can be able to get. I wouldn't really now go into the profitability, for example, of the oil, but we have indeed carried out models of different scenarios to see, is this oil commercially viable? Yes, it is commercially viable. Government will take the lion's share of this oil. I think the total government take is about 70% of what comes out. So we have a good, there is a fiscal framework for this sector, which has maximized the benefits that government is going to get from this. Then there was a question on the revenues, how much money have we put in, and where is that money coming from? That maybe my honorable minister will help me answer. For me, the money we receive to do our work actually comes from you. And there are different stakeholders involved in this. For example, I wouldn't know how much has been spent on roads. I wouldn't know how much has been spent on certain things. What we look after is the the costs that are going into the development of these oil and gas resources. Something I should have addressed, and this is the last one, regarding the talk about energy transition. That comes up a lot, to say by the time we produce this oil, will it even not be valueless, because we could have transitioned to electric cars and things like that, more renewable energy. Now we actually keep an eye a lot, because this industry, as you know, is a global sector. So we keep an eye on the global trends, whether it is to do with the price, whether it is to do with the resources, whether it is to do with political stability, because all these are bringing a lot of dynamics in as far as the energy sector is concerned. So with respect to the transition into the renewable energies, we are still satisfied. This talk, first of all, has been around for a very long time. I think 15 years, 20 years back when I was in school, you could actually think that in the next 5 years, everything is going to be renewable. But we think that for the foreseeable future, the fossil fuels, so oil and gas, are very much going to be a major part of the energy mix, especially here in Africa, because of we recognize the trends, especially in the developed countries, with respect to the transitioning into the renewables. That can be a subject matter, a discussion for another time. But there are also a lot of uncertainties there. The infrastructure that is required for these renewables, for example, the electric cars, how much this could cost, how and when they could become available to the global world. All these are questions that are not answered as yet. So very clearly, the fossil fuels, oil and gas, are going to be very much part of our energy mix, at least for our generation, those of us here. And that is a very important consideration in making the business decisions that are made in the sector. I submit.
So, Mr. Chairman, just to pardon what you asked me. The bulk of the money, did you say 13 billion? Most of that money is from the private sector. Government does little things like I said, training here, travel here, and so on. But the bulk of oil investment is from the private sector. You recall, sir, that we have what we call production sharing agreement. That the private sector will come, spend money, and then recoup from production. This is an arrangement government has got with the private sector. Now, on the electric cars, we are monitoring very closely. The problem there is the good battery. The research is ongoing to get a good battery which will sustain 70 miles, which is same as a car. If this car is going to be need charging at Mitala Maria, you're going to spend some time there. It won't be very user-friendly. So research is ongoing, we are monitoring. But as it has been said, this oil will still remain part of our economy for some time. Oil will remain part of our economy for some time because oil doesn't go only in cars. It goes in other factories as well, for which we haven't got solutions. We are trying solar. There's some factories with the roof full of solar, but still the battery is a limitation because at night there's no sunshine. So you must store what the solar panels are producing. So we are part of that monitoring system. So oil will still remain a key part of our economy. Madam, we couldn't produce because we wouldn't have where to put the oil. As he has explained, whereas Ghana, the oil was in the sea, they could bring a barge near there, produce and pump into this ship, and it goes. Ours is inland, very far away from the coast. So if you try to produce that oil, you'll have nowhere to put it. So we must, as a matter of necessity, have a route to the sea for export, and then a route to, you said, Boloba. Yes, for the refined product. So we must do those first before we pump out the oil. Because the oil, as I said, the day it will come out, everybody will know, because it is massive. It is massive. It is something you can't take hiding. Now, Mr. Chairman, if you permit, now I'll ask Caroline to finalize the other issues. Please.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. I think on the energy transition, definitely the ministry is not also sleeping. Right now we are reviewing our energy policy, and we are also beginning the process of reviewing the petroleum policy. And definitely I think some of the issues we are trying to see is how to build synergies between the petroleum and the energy policy. Because definitely given the international trends, there's an indication that even the oil and gas countries and countries internationally are transitioning and renaming to energy. So one of the things we are thinking of as a ministry is to see how to ensure that the oil and gas policy and the energy policy marry and to measure up to what is happening in the international world. Because definitely oil and gas can be used to facilitate the activities for renewable energy. So we are not really lying down as a ministry, and when you look at what we are doing, we are definitely looking at that. So when I go to the specific comments, one of the things you asked was what other subsequent agreements? Because definitely you realize that the Kyoto Protocol was replaced by the Paris Agreement. So we don't know what will come forward, so I don't know whether that needs to be mentioned in the bill. And then there was a comment on the lead agencies that we should make a suggestion on which lead agencies we are making reference to. I think it is clear that we said that the climate change policy clearly indicates the lead agencies. So we should build synergies between the climate change policy and what is included in this bill to actually bring those particular lead agencies into the bill. Then in terms of financing, I think here we had emphasized that the financing should come from the private sector. But again, the question that came from the honorable members was that how do we finance beyond the private sector? I think definitely we have the polluter pays principle, which still goes back to the private sector. And there are issues of the bilateral climate financing agreements between the developed countries seeking to offset their carbon emissions, and then for us, the developed countries. So that would be one of the issues that maybe Uganda can see if we say in terms of offsetting, if the other countries can take 50, we remain with 50 because also we have to report to that effect. But also I think we also need, some of the things that we need to focus is actually development of projects as clean development mechanisms. Because, for example, Vijagali was developed as a clean development mechanism project. So that means when they get their carbon credits, they are able to trade. So maybe that's one of the things that actually needs to be able to come out. But this, again, is one of the issues we asked in one of the questions, that is there sustainable development mechanisms incorporated in this bill? Because it didn't seem to come out clearly. The issue of giving a lot of powers to the Climate Change Department as opposed to the Environment Committee. Definitely the Environment Committee, again, the chair here will give clarifications. The Environment Committee is what has been existing, and everything that is pertaining to environment, climate change was reporting to the Climate Change Committee. So we can again see how we can be able to build synergies there. I think the other aspects were actually addressed by the minister in terms of the transformers. What we're focusing on is the transformers, because definitely we shall appreciate that as a country, as we sign off these conventions, protocols, and agreements, some of the things that we're using, that we are using currently become obsolete by virtue of the fact that we actually assent to this. So that's why we actually need to see how best we can be able to manage these obsolete assets in terms, because then it becomes a waste. It becomes a waste which we may not actually have an immediate way on how best we are going to safely dispose it of. That's why the Honorable Minister said that for now, dig a hole. But definitely we need to come up with the better ways on how we can be able to manage some of those things that become wastes and see how we can properly be able to store but also to dispose them of. Because also when you look at the aspects of the management of materials that contain radioactive waste, that is also a challenge for us.
A bigger one.
So as a ministry, we are actually trying to see that we get a specific area where we can be able to manage this. So definitely, as we are sent to these conventions, protocols, and agreements, we also need to be cognizant as a country that these ones become definitely waste and assets that we need to manage as waste. So we need to be able to have an area where we are able to maybe build bunkers and be able to keep this as we see what old technology will actually come that we can actually use to be able to dispose of those particular obsolete assets. Okay.
I needed a comment with clarification in section 25.
Yes.
Where you were saying it could be being removed from the bill, and I was asking whether you have a suggestion how you want it.
Yes.
Then you wanted a comment on the dams.
The dams.
How many dams are in the way? Now we'll handle that, but you handle this one because it is important, the mitigation.
Then on that, I was sharing with someone from ULA. He told me that there are containers that are coming in the country for just dumping and disposal, and that the law allows that.